A billionaire CEO ordered his usual steak, confident, arrogant, and cruel. But when the waitress placed a folded note beside his glass, his face went pale, and that one message exposed the secret he'd spent years trying to forget. The night was calm inside the Golden Ember, a restaurant that glowed like a jewel in the heart of the city. Its chandeliers shimmered, the air smelled of truffle butter and expensive wine, and the guests spoke in the soft, confident tones of people who had never worried about money. For the staff, though, it was another night of smiles that hid exhaustion, smiles that had to stay even when customers were cruel. Then, the door opened. A gust of cool air swept in, carrying with it a presence that instantly shifted the room's energy. The conversations stopped mid-sentence. The piano player missed a note. Even a manager straightened his tie nervously. In walked Ethan Cole, billionaire CEO of Cole Dynamics. His tailored black suit fit like it had been sculpted on him, his shoes gleamed, and his watch probably cost more than the restaurant's chandelier. He was the kind of man people recognized, even if they had never met him. His face was on magazine covers, business shows, and motivational posters that said things like "dream bigger, work harder." To some, he was a genius. To others, he was ruthless. To everyone, he was untouchable. "Table for one," he said curtly, pulling off his sunglasses, though the sun had set hours ago. His voice was low, commanding, and impossible to ignore. The host stammered, "All right this way, Mr. Cole." As he walked through the restaurant, whispers followed him like shadows. "That's him, the tech billionaire. I heard he fired 500 people in one day. I heard he donated millions to charity." No one knew which story was true, but everyone wanted to stay on his good side. He sat at the best table, facing the city through a glass wall. A waiter rushed to pour his water, hands trembling. Even the chef peeked out from the kitchen window, nervous but excited. This could be a career-making moment, or a disaster. Everyone wanted to impress him. Everyone except one woman. Her name was Amara Johnson, a quiet, graceful black waitress who'd been working there for a year. She was polite, soft-spoken, and steady under pressure. But those who looked closely saw a kind of quiet sadness in her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying too much responsibility too young. Amara was 23 and studying part-time to become a social worker. Every shift meant another small step toward her dream. She never complained, even on the nights her feet ached or when tips were bad. But behind her calm smile lived a story she rarely shared, a story of loss, sacrifice, and strength. She approached his table, not nervous, just focused. She'd served difficult guests before. "What will you have tonight, sir?" she asked gently, pen poised over her notepad. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. "Steak, medium rare, and make sure it's perfect. I don't eat mistakes." His tone was sharp, almost like an order to a soldier. Amara nodded. "Right away, sir." As she turned, her eyes caught a flicker of something, his hand trembling slightly as he scrolled, his jaw tight, his shoulders heavy. The man everyone feared didn't look powerful. He looked tired, lonely even. Still, she said nothing. She just walked toward the kitchen, unaware that this ordinary order, this single dinner, was about to change both their lives forever. When Amara returned from the kitchen, the aroma of sizzling steak filled the air. The plate in her hands gleamed under the restaurant's golden lights. A flawless cut, cooked perfectly to order, glistening with butter and herbs. Every detail was precise, every motion practiced. She approached Ethan Cole's table quietly, but before she could speak, his voice cut through the soft jazz music. "I don't care what it takes. Fire the entire team if they can't deliver by Monday," he barked in his phone. Heads turned. Guests glanced up, then quickly looked down, pretending not to hear. The other waiters exchanged nervous glances. It wasn't the first time a powerful man had raised his voice here, but something about Ethan's tone made the air feel heavy. Amara froze mid-step. That name, Cole Dynamics. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't just any company. It was the company that had turned her family's life upside down. 2 years ago, her father, David Johnson, had worked there as a senior engineer. He'd given 12 years of his life to the company, often coming home late, but proud of what he built. "We're creating the future, Amara," he used to say, his eyes bright with hope. Then one day, everything changed. A corporate memo. A new CEO initiative. Automation. Machines replaced hundreds of workers overnight, including her father. No warning. No backup plan. Just a cold email that said, "Your position has been made redundant." He tried to stay strong. He searched for jobs, took side work, even sold his tools. But it broke something inside him. He went from a man full of purpose to a man full of regret. And when his health declined, Amara had to take up 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. And now, standing just a few feet away, was the man who had signed that decision. The man whose name her father used to respect, Ethan Cole. Her chest tightened as she set the steak down gently in front of him. Ethan was still on his call, his tone sharp, his words careless. No excuses. If they can't keep up, replace them. Every syllable hit her like a hammer. He finally hung up and looked at her, annoyed. What are you waiting for? Go. I'll call you if I need something. Amara swallowed hard. Of course, sir. She turned to leave, but something inside her stopped her mid-step, a small voice whispering, "He needs to know." Taking a deep breath, she reached in her apron, pulled out a folded piece of paper she had written earlier on her break, a note she never intended to give. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed it beside his glass. Then, without another word, she walked away. Ethan frowned, confused. What's this? He picked up the note, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was neat but shaky, each letter pressed deeply into the paper, as if written with emotion, not ink. You don't know me, Mr. Cole, but your company destroyed my father's life. He believed in your dream, until your dream cost him his own. Ethan's world stopped. The sounds of the restaurant faded into silence. His hand froze midair. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He looked around, scanning the room for the waitress, the one with calm eyes and a quiet smile. But she was gone, and for the first time in years, the man who commanded millions felt completely powerless. Ethan's mind went blank. The words on the note replayed in his head over and over, each one sharper than the last. Your dream cost him his own. He couldn't eat. He couldn't think. His chest felt tight, his throat dry. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control. He pushed the untouched steak away and stood up abruptly. The chair screeched against the polished floor, drawing curious glances. Every eye in the restaurant followed him as he scanned the room. There, by the far corner, she was refilling water glasses at another table, moving gracefully, unaware of the storm she had just unleashed. Ethan's steps were heavy, his pulse loud in his ears as he approached her. Conversations fell to whispers. The air thickened with tension. "Miss Amara, is it?" he said stiffly, his voice carrying a weight that made even the nearby diners freeze. "Did you write this?" He held the folded note between 2 fingers like it was evidence of a crime. Amara turned slowly, setting down the water jug. Her eyes met his calm, steady, unflinching. "Yes, sir, I did." The restaurant fell completely silent. Even a piano player stopped mid-song. Ethan's tone hardened. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" His voice dropped, low but sharp. "This is not how you address a customer, especially me." Amara took a slow breath. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes didn't waver. "With respect, sir," she replied softly, "it's not how you treat people either." Gasps rippled through the tables. One waiter nearly dropped a tray. Ethan blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his employees, not his board members, not even the journalists who feared losing access to him. But Amara stood there, small in stature, yet strong in presence, refusing to look away. "My father worked for Coal Dynamics for 12 years, she continued, her voice trembling but growing steadier with every word. "He believed in what you built. He gave everything to that company, late nights, weekends, holidays, because he thought you cared about your people." Ethan's expression shifted. The arrogance began to fade, replaced by something else, guilt, confusion, maybe even shame. Amara swallowed hard, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. When you replaced them with machines, he still defended you. He said you'd at least help them find new work, help them transition. But you didn't. Her voice broke slightly. He lost his job. then his home, then his health. And last year, she took a shaky breath. Last year, I lost him. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He stood frozen, the note still crumpled in his hand. The restaurant was so quiet you could hear the clinking of a spoon somewhere in the distance. Finally, he spoke, barely above a whisper. I didn't know. Amara's eyes glistened with tears, but her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. That's the problem, sir. You never do. For a long, heavy moment, neither of them moved. The powerful billionaire and the humble waitress stood face to face, two lives divided by status, but bound by truth. And in that silence, something inside Ethan Cole began to crack. That night, Ethan Cole couldn't sleep. His penthouse, usually a place of calm and control, suddenly felt like a prison of glass and silence. The city lights glittered below, towers of steel and gold that he'd helped build. But instead of pride, all he felt was emptiness. He poured himself a drink, sat by the window, and stared at his reflection. The note lay on his desk beside a stack of contracts. Its words echoed in his head. He believed in your dream, until your dream cost him his own. He'd built his company on efficiency, on cutting costs, on being the man who could do what others wouldn't. It's just business, he always said. But for the first time, he saw what that phrase really meant. It meant families without paychecks. It meant fathers losing hope. It meant daughters like Amara working double shifts to survive. He ran a hand through his hair and whispered to himself, "What have I done?" Morning came too soon. Ethan hadn't closed his eyes once. The city was still waking when he picked up his phone and called his assistant. His voice was hoarse, but determined. "Find me everything about the workers we laid off from the old factory." Every one of them, ordered. There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, that was over 2 years ago. Most of those files are archived." "Then unarchive them," he said firmly. Today, and for the first time in his career, Ethan Cole didn't schedule a meeting for profit. He scheduled one for redemption. Over the next week, Ethan disappeared from the public eye. Reporters speculated, investors panicked, but he didn't care. He spent his days driving himself to old factory towns, the places his company had once thrived and then abandoned. He visited community centers where the walls were cracked, where laid-off workers met to share odd jobs and hand-me-down groceries. Some recognized him instantly. Others turned away in anger. But Ethan didn't leave. He listened. He listened to a man who had built assembly lines now living out of his truck, to a mother who had to pull her kids out of school because tuition was too high, to an older worker who said softly, "We didn't just lose our jobs, sir. We lost our dignity." Every story chipped away at the armor he'd worn for years. By the 7th day, Ethan sat in his car outside the old Cold Dynamics factory, now an empty shell. The gates were rusted, the windows dusty. The silence there was heavier than any boardroom he'd ever entered. He closed his eyes, hearing Amara's voice again. "That's the problem, sir. You never do." When the board of directors finally learned what he was doing, reviewing layoffs, planning to reopen the old facility for worker retraining, they were outraged. "You'll ruin our profits," one executive warned in disbelief. Ethan stood from his seat slowly, his gaze steady. "Then maybe," he said quietly, "it's time we change what profit means." And for the first time in his life, the billionaire who once measured worth in dollars began to understand the true value of people. A month later, the evening lights of the Golden Ember flickered once more, the same restaurant where everything had started. But this time, something felt different. The waiters whispered excitedly as a familiar name appeared on the reservation list. Ethan Cole, the billionaire, was returning. But unlike the first time, there was no tension in the air, no arrogance in the expectation of his arrival. Instead, there was curiosity and a strange sense of anticipation. When the doors opened, Ethan walked in, not alone, but surrounded by several people. They weren't investors or business elites. They were ordinary men and women, dressed modestly, smiling nervously as they followed him inside. The staff recognized some of them. They were former employees from the old Cold Dynamics factory, workers who had once been let go without a second glance. And walking quietly among them was Amara Johnson. Her hands trembled slightly when she saw him. She hadn't expected to ever face him again, not after that unforgettable night. But there he was, walking toward her with a calmness she didn't recognize. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something deeper, humility. "Miss Johnson," Ethan said warmly, stopping before her. "It's good to see you again." She nodded carefully, still unsure. "Welcome back, sir. What brings you here tonight?" Ethan smiled, not the cold, practiced grin of a CEO, but the genuine smile of a man who had finally found peace. "A dinner," he said softly, "and a promise." He turned to his group and motioned for them to sit. "These people built my company's foundation," he announced. "And today, they'd join me again, not as workers, but as partners in something new." The restaurant went still. Every ear tuned in. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He handed it to Amara, who hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter embossed with the seal of Greenwood University, and across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Full scholarship, tuition and living expenses covered." Amara's breath caught. "Sir, I can't accept this." Ethan shook his head gently. "You already have. You gave me something I didn't know I'd lost, perspective." He turned, addressing the room, his voice steady and sincere. "For years, I thought leadership was about profit and control. But this woman reminded me, leadership is about people. It's about every hand that helped build the dream." A quiet murmur filled the restaurant. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, echoing through the elegant hall. Even the chef stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his eyes. Amara stood speechless, tears glimmering in her eyes. She had never sought recognition, only understanding. And somehow, she had changed the heart of the man she once blamed. That night, as she walked home beneath the silver glow of the city lights, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "Dad, he finally heard you." A gentle breeze brushed against her face, as if the universe itself was answering. And for the first time in years, both Amara and Ethan, the waitress and the billionaire, found something far greater than success or forgiveness. They found peace. Moral of the story: even the most powerful people can forget the value of human life until someone brave enough reminds them. Because sometimes one quiet voice can shake even the loudest empire. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of pride, pain, and redemption, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because stories like this you don't want to miss.